I arrived at my younger brother Derek's wedding reception at the Grand Meridian restaurant wearing my only decent suit, the navy blue one I had bought at a discount store 3 years ago. The fabric was worn at the elbows, and the pants were slightly too short, but it was clean and pressed. I had spent an hour that morning making sure every crease was perfect. As I walked through the main entrance, the marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and I could hear laughter and music flowing from the main ballroom. My heart pounded with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today my family would finally see me. My father, Richard, spotted me immediately. His face transformed from polite host smile to pure disgust in seconds. He excused himself from the group of well-dressed guests he had been entertaining and strode toward me with purpose. Before I could even say hello, he grabbed my elbow and pulled me aside, his grip tight enough to hurt. "What are you doing here, Jonathan?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "I thought we made it clear that your presence would be inappropriate." "Derek invited me," I said quietly. "He's my brother. This is his wedding." Derek was being polite. My father snapped. "He didn't actually expect you to show up. Look at you. You're an embarrassment to this family." His voice rose with those last words, and several nearby guests turned to stare. My face burned with shame, but I stood my ground. Before I could respond, Derek himself appeared, his arm around his new wife, Christina. They both looked like they had stepped out of a magazine, everything about them polished and expensive. "Jonathan," Derek said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "I'm surprised you made it. How much does a janitor make these days, anyway? Seriously, I'm curious." The question hung in the air like a trap. I could see the cruel amusement in his eyes, the way Christina smirked beside him. Around us, more guests had stopped talking to watch the scene unfold. $11 an hour, I said quietly. The entire group erupted in laughter. My father shook his head in theatrical disappointment, and Derek grinned like he had just won a prize. I felt something inside me crack, a small fracture in whatever hope I had been carrying. I turned toward the door, ready to leave with what little dignity I had left. I tried to slip out through the side entrance near the coat check, keeping my head down and moving quickly, but my father's voice boomed across the reception hall, stopping me in my tracks. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." I turned slowly to see him standing near the DJ booth, holding a microphone. My stomach dropped. The music faded, and 200 wedding guests turned their faces toward Richard, curiosity lighting up their expressions. He smiled, the same charming smile he used in business meetings, but his eyes were cold as they found me across the room. "I want to apologize for a small disruption this evening," he began, his voice carrying perfectly through the sound system. "My eldest son Jonathan has decided to grace us with his presence, despite being too ashamed of his failures to properly celebrate his brother's success." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. My father continued, his words carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. "For those of you who don't know, Jonathan dropped out of business school 8 years ago. Since then, he's been working as a janitor at various commercial buildings around the city. He lives in a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood and drives a 20-year-old Honda Civic that sounds like it's dying every time he starts it." Laughter scattered through the audience. Some people looked uncomfortable, but most seemed entertained by the spectacle. I could see phones being raised, recording the moment for social media. My humiliation would live forever on the internet. "Now, I don't want anyone to think poorly of Jonathan," my father said, his voice taking on a mock-serious tone. "He's doing the best he can with his limited abilities. We can't all be successful like Derek here, who's a senior manager at a top tech company, or like Christina, who's a partner at her law firm. Some people are just meant for simpler work." Derek's new wife Christina leaned toward a table of her friends, whispering just loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. "Thank God Derek isn't a failure like his brother. I couldn't imagine being married to someone so pathetic." Her friends nodded in agreement, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. My mother Patricia stood beside my father, her face carefully neutral. She wouldn't meet my eyes, wouldn't acknowledge my existence. 8 years of silence from her, 8 years of pretending I didn't exist unless absolutely necessary. This moment was no different. Several guests I recognized from childhood, people I had played with and grown up alongside, were filming on their phones now. They would post this later, share it with their friends, turn my pain into entertainment. I imagined the captions they would write, the jokes they would make in the comments. Derek approached me with exaggerated slowness, like a predator toying with wounded prey. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, making a show of counting out bills. $200 in 20s, held out toward me with a sympathetic expression that didn't match the cruelty in his eyes. "Here, big brother," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear clearly. "This should help with rent this month. I know things are tight for you." The offer was designed to humiliate me further, to paint him as the generous, successful brother helping his poor, struggling sibling. Every eye in the room watched to see what I would do. If I took the money, I would confirm everything they believed about me. If I refused, I would look prideful and ungrateful. I looked at the money, then at Derek's face, then at the 200 guests watching this moment unfold. "No thank you," I said quietly. Derek shrugged and dropped the bills on the polished marble floor at my feet. "Suit yourself. Pride doesn't pay rent though, does it?" More laughter, more phones recording, more proof that I was the family failure, the disappointing eldest son who couldn't measure up. I stepped over the scattered bills and walked toward the main entrance, my face burning, my hands shaking. Behind me, I could hear my father's voice on the microphone again, apologizing for the interruption and inviting everyone to continue enjoying the celebration. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stood in the cool evening air, loosening my tie. Through the windows, I could see the party resuming, the music starting again, people returning to their conversations and their champagne. My father raised his glass in a toast to Derek's future, his face beaming with pride for his successful son. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved under a simple initial. It rang twice before a professional voice answered. "It's time," I said quietly. "Do it now." I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Through the glass doors, I watched my father finish his toast, watched Derek kiss Christina for the cameras, watched my mother smile and clap along with everyone else. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had no idea who I really was, and they were about to find out in the worst possible way. I stood in the parking lot, the sounds of celebration muted behind thick glass and distance. The evening air had turned cool, and I welcomed it against my flushed skin. My hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a strange calm that settled over me like a familiar coat. I had known this moment would come eventually. I had prepared for it, planned for it, even hoped for it in my darker moments. But now that it was here, I felt something unexpected. Sadness. Not for myself, but for them, for what they were about to lose. 5 minutes passed. Then I saw them. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to the restaurant's main entrance in perfect formation. The vehicles were immaculate, their paint gleaming under the streetlights. 6 security personnel in sharp charcoal suits emerged from the first and third vehicles, moving with practiced efficiency. From the middle SUV stepped a man I knew well, Marcus Webb, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my father thought I made in a month. Marcus was in his early 50s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. He had been managing properties for me for the past 4 years, and he was exceptionally good at his job. He spotted me immediately in the shadows of the parking lot and gave me a subtle nod. I nodded back, giving him silent permission to proceed. The security team formed a loose perimeter as Marcus approached the restaurant entrance. Through the glass, I could see the party continuing, oblivious to what was about to unfold. The music played, people danced, champagne flowed. My father was talking with a group of his business associates, his hands gesturing animatedly as he told some story that made them all laugh. Marcus pulled open the heavy door and stepped inside, his team following behind him. The music didn't stop immediately. It took a few seconds for people to notice the new arrivals, for conversations to fade as guests registered that something unusual was happening. I watched as Marcus walked straight toward my father with calm determination, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. The music finally stopped. The DJ looked confused, unsure whether this was part of the planned evening or something else entirely. 200 faces turned toward Marcus and his security team, curiosity replacing celebration. My father looked annoyed at first, then concerned as Marcus approached him directly. "Excuse me," my father said, his voice carrying that particular tone of irritation reserved for interruptions. "This is a private event. If you're with the restaurant staff, you can speak with the event coordinator." "I'm not with the restaurant staff," Marcus replied, his voice calm and professional. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm the property manager for Blackstone Holdings Group. I'm here regarding a significant ownership issue with this venue." My father's expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. "Ownership issue? What are you talking about? I paid $50,000 to rent this entire restaurant for the evening. Everything is arranged and paid for." "I understand that," Marcus said, opening his portfolio. "However, your rental agreement and payment are no longer relevant. The property ownership has changed, and the current owner has revoked permission for this event to continue." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Guests turned to each other, trying to understand what was happening. Derek pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "This is ridiculous," Derek said, his voice loud and aggressive. "We have a contract. You can't just kick us out. I'll call my lawyer right now and sue this place for everything it's worth." Marcus remained completely calm, unbothered by Derek's threats. He pulled several documents from his portfolio and held them up for everyone to see. The Grand Meridian restaurant was sold 3 days ago to a private owner through Blackstone Holdings Group. The transaction was completed legally and properly. The new owner has decided that this venue is no longer available for tonight's event. "That's impossible," my father said, his voice rising. "The owner is Martin Chen. I've known him for 15 years. He would have told me if he was selling." "Martin Chen completed the sale on Thursday afternoon," Marcus explained. "The new owner took possession immediately. All existing rental agreements were subject to review and approval by the new ownership. This particular event has not been approved." Christina grabbed Derek's arm, her carefully composed expression cracking. "Derek, do something. This is our wedding reception. They can't just shut it down." My father stepped closer to Marcus, his face inches from the property manager's. "I want to know who this new owner is. Right now. I want their name, their contact information, and I want to speak with them immediately." Marcus didn't flinch. He simply turned his body slightly and pointed through the glass doors toward the parking lot where I stood in the shadows, just visible under a distant streetlight. "That gentleman there. He purchased this property 72 hours ago for $12 million, and he's decided that your family's celebration ends now." Every head in the room turned toward the windows. I stepped forward slightly, enough for the light to catch my face. Recognition rippled through the crowd like a wave. Gasps. Whispers. Phones raised again, but this time to capture something very different than my humiliation. My father stood completely still, his face draining of color. Derek's mouth hung open in shock. Christina looked like she might faint. My mother pressed her hand to her chest, her carefully neutral expression finally breaking into something real. Confusion, fear, and the beginning of understanding that everything they thought they knew was wrong. The chaos that erupted inside the Grand Meridian restaurant was immediate and total. Guests crowded toward the windows, pressing against the glass to get a better view of me standing in the parking lot. Their phones were out now, but the videos they were recording told a completely different story than the ones from 10 minutes ago. I could see the confusion on their faces, the desperate attempt to reconcile the image of the pathetic janitor with the man who apparently owned the $12 million building they were currently standing in. My father was the first to move. He pushed through the crowd with no regard for politeness or ceremony, his face transforming from pale shock to bright red fury. He burst through the main entrance, Derek and Christina close behind him, with my mother trailing at a distance. The cool evening air hit them, but they didn't seem to notice. My father's hands were shaking as he strode toward me. "What kind of game are you playing, Jonathan?" he demanded, his voice cracking with emotion. "What is this? Some kind of sick joke? Did you pay actors to come here and pretend to kick us out?" I looked at my father calmly, my hands in my pockets. "I'm not playing any game, Dad. I simply own this building. and I've decided I no longer want to host this particular event." "That's a lie," Derek shouted, pointing at me accusingly. "You're a janitor. You make $11 an hour. There's no way you could afford a property like this. No bank would give you a loan. No investor would back you. You're lying." I pulled out my phone without saying a word. I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward them. The numbers glowed in the dim light. I scrolled through the transaction history, showing the wire transfer dated 3 days ago. $12 million from my business account to the previous owner's escrow. Then I pulled up the property deed document, official and notarized, showing my name listed as sole owner through my LLC, Summit Facility Holdings. My father's hands shook as he reached for my phone, squinting at the screen like he could make the numbers change through sheer force of will. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through the documents, seeing confirmation after confirmation that what I was showing him was real and legal and true. "This can't be real," he whispered. "This isn't possible." Patricia finally caught up to the group, slightly out of breath from hurrying in her heels. "Jonathan, please," she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone I had never heard from her before. "Help us understand what's happening. How can you afford this? Where did you get this kind of money?" I looked at my mother, this woman who had stood silently by while my father humiliated me, who had refused to return my calls for years, who had told her friends I was a disappointment she didn't like to discuss. "You really want to know?" I asked. "Yes," she said desperately. "Please, just explain this." 8 years ago, when I supposedly dropped out of business school, I began, my voice steady and clear. I didn't actually drop out because I was failing or because I couldn't handle the work. I left because I had a business opportunity, a real one. Grandfather gave me a loan of $10,000. At the mention of his father, Richard's expression shifted to something complex and painful. My grandfather had passed away 5 years ago, and I knew the relationship between him and my father had always been difficult. "I used that $10,000 to start a commercial cleaning company," I continued. "I called it Summit Facility Services. I started small, just me and 2 employees, cleaning office buildings at night. But I had a vision. I wanted to create a company that treated cleaning staff with respect, paid them well, and provided excellent service to our clients." Derek was shaking his head, refusing to believe what he was hearing. "A cleaning company? You expect us to believe you made millions from mopping floors?" "Not just mopping floors," I said. "Providing comprehensive facility services to commercial properties. Within the first year, we had contracts with 15 buildings. Within 3 years, we were in 8 cities. Today, Summit Facility Services operates in 43 cities across 15 states. We have over 3,000 employees. Our annual revenue last year was $230 million. The numbers hung in the air like physical objects. Christina made a small choking sound. Patricia sat down on a concrete planter, her legs apparently unable to support her. Derek's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been jealousy. "That's why I kept working as a janitor," I explained. "Not because it was my only option, but because I wanted to stay connected to the work and the people who do it. I wanted to understand what our employees experienced every day. I worked alongside them, learned from them, and used that knowledge to build a better company." My father was staring at his hands, the phone forgotten. 3,000 employees, he repeated quietly. 43 cities, $230 million in revenue. "My personal net worth," I said, deciding to lay everything out, "is approximately $87 million. The building we're standing outside of right now is just one of 17 commercial properties I own in this city." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the sounds from inside the restaurant seemed to fade away. My family stood before me like statues, frozen in their shock and confusion. I watched them process the information, saw the moment when the full weight of it truly hit them. But I wasn't finished. There was more they needed to know, and it was going to hurt them far worse than what I had already revealed. "There's more," I said quietly, "and you're not going to like it." Marcus appeared at the restaurant entrance and gestured toward a side room, away from the gawking guests and their cameras. I nodded and led my family inside, through a private corridor to a small conference room the restaurant used for business meetings. The room was elegant but simple, with a long mahogany table and leather chairs. Marcus and two security personnel positioned themselves near the door, ensuring our privacy. My father, mother, Derek, and Christina sat on one side of the table. I remained standing on the other side, my hands resting on the back of a chair. The distance between us felt both physical and symbolic, a chasm that had been growing for 8 years and had finally become impossible to ignore. The 17 commercial properties I mentioned, I began, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of what I was about to reveal. Let me tell you exactly which ones I own. I pulled out my phone and opened a detailed list, then began reading addresses and building names. With each one, I watched my family's faces change as recognition dawned. The Riverside Tower on 7th Street, where your investment firm leases 3 floors, Dad. I own that building. The Sheffield Shopping Complex on Market Avenue, where you have your boutique, Mom. I own that property too. The Parkview Residence Apartments on Elm Street, where you and Christina just signed a lease for your new condo, Derek. That's mine as well. The color drained from Derek's face. Christina's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. I continued down the list. The Grandview Office Park, where Dad's biggest client has their headquarters. The Harbor Street Retail Center, where Mom's boutique suppliers have their showroom. The Metropolitan Business Center, where Derek's company holds their quarterly board meetings. All mine. All owned through various LLCs and managed by property management companies that kept my identity completely private. Patricia's voice came out as barely a whisper. You've been our landlord? For the past 3 years? Yes, I confirmed. I've been your landlord without you knowing. I've watched you, Dad, brag to your business partners about your success in a building I own. I've listened to you, Derek, make jokes about my poverty while living in an apartment I could evict you from with proper notice. I've seen you, Mom, host charity luncheons at your boutique in a property where I control the lease terms. Richard finally looked up at me, his eyes red and watery. Why? He asked hoarsely. Why would you do this? Why hide it from us? Because I tried to tell you, I said, my voice hardening with the memory. 2 years ago, Christmas dinner at your house. Do you remember that night? The room fell silent. I could see my mother's face change as the memory surfaced. Derek looked away uncomfortably. My father closed his eyes. I came to dinner early, I said, walking them through the memory they had probably tried to forget. I asked if I could talk to the family before the other guests arrived. I was so excited. Summit Facility Services had just reached $100 million in annual revenue. We had expanded to 25 cities. I had personally become worth over $40 million. I wanted to share my success with you. I wanted you to know that I had made something of myself. I paused, letting the memory solidify in their minds before I continued. I got as far as saying I wanted to tell you about my business when you cut me off, Dad. You held up your hand and said, I don't want to hear about your little cleaning business, Jonathan. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. We have important guests coming tonight, and I don't want you filling their ears with your pathetic attempts at entrepreneurship. My father's face crumpled. I remember, he whispered. And you, Derek? I turned to my brother. You laughed. You said I should focus on affording a better car before I started bragging about business ventures. You said maybe someday I'd be able to shop at regular stores instead of thrift shops, and then maybe I'd have something worth talking about. Derek stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. That night, I continued, I made a decision. I decided to stay silent. I decided to watch and see how you really felt about me, without the influence of my money or success. I kept working as a janitor. I kept driving my old car. I kept living in my modest apartment. And I kept building my empire in secret. Christina spoke up for the first time, her voice shaking. That's cruel. You let us think you were poor. You let us feel superior to you. You manipulated us. Did I? I asked, my voice sharp. Or did I simply give you the opportunity to show your true character? I didn't make you mock me. I didn't force you to laugh at my supposed poverty. I didn't compel you to exclude me from family events or refuse my phone calls. You chose to do those things because you believed I was beneath you. The truth of my words hung heavy in the air. There was no defense against them because they were accurate and we all knew it. But then my father interrupted with something that changed everything. Your grandfather didn't just give you a $10,000 loan, Richard said suddenly. his voice hollow. His will left you $500,000. The room went completely silent. Even Marcus, standing by the door, shifted his attention fully to the conversation. "What?" I said quietly. My father looked up at me, tears streaming down his face now. "When my father died, his will left you $500,000. As the executor of his estate, I was responsible for distributing the assets. I never told you about the money. Instead, I invested it in my own firm, thinking I could grow it and eventually give you more than he left you. But I made bad trades. I lost most of it. Over the past 8 years, I've been hiding this from you, hoping I could somehow recover the money before you found out." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. $500,000. My grandfather's final gift to me, stolen by my own father. I did the math quickly in my head. If that money had been invested properly 8 years ago, conservatively, it would be worth over $2 million today. Patricia turned to Richard, her face a mask of horror. "You stole from your own son? For 8 years you've been lying about this?" "I planned to pay him back," Richard said weakly. "I thought if I could just make the right investments, I could give him even more than what he was owed." "But you didn't," I said, my voice cold. "You lost it, and instead of confessing, you kept the secret. You let me think my grandfather only gave me $10,000. You let me believe he didn't think I was worth more than that." Derek spoke up then, his voice small. I knew. Everyone turned to look at him. Derek's face was pale, his hands clasped together tightly on the table. "I found out about the inheritance 2 years ago," Derek admitted. "I overheard Dad on the phone with his accountant, discussing how to hide the loss from the estate audit. I confronted him privately, and he told me everything. He begged me not to say anything. He promised me a partnership in the investment firm if I stayed quiet. So I did. I kept your secret, Dad, and I kept it from Jonathan." The betrayal cut deeper than anything else that had happened that evening. My own brother, knowing our father had stolen from me, choosing silence for personal gain. I pulled out my phone again, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. "I recorded something earlier," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I left my phone on a table near where you were talking with your business partners, Dad, right before you grabbed the microphone to humiliate me in front of everyone." I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, loud and clear and cruel. "Honestly, Jonathan's probably going to end up homeless in a few years. He can barely afford that dump he lives in now. I thank God every day that Derek turned out successful. At least one of my sons isn't a complete embarrassment." One of Richard's business partners laughed on the recording. "You must have done something wrong raising that one, Rich. How does a smart guy like you end up with such a failure for a son?" "Some people are just born without ambition or intelligence," my father's voice responded. "I tried with Jonathan, I really did. But you can't make someone successful if they don't have it in them. At least I can tell people I have one successful son. That's better than nothing." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was suffocating. My mother had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Derek looked like he might be sick. Christina sat frozen, probably reassessing every assumption she had made about the man she had just married. But before anyone could respond, Marcus stepped forward with urgent news that would make everything so much worse. "I apologize for the interruption," Marcus said, "but there's something you all need to know immediately." Marcus moved to the table and placed a tablet in front of the family, its screen displaying financial documents and news alerts. "In the past 15 minutes, 3 major developments have occurred that are directly relevant to this situation." He tapped the screen, pulling up the first document. 3 of your largest client accounts have just submitted formal withdrawal requests. Richard, the Westfield Trust, the Morrison Family Portfolio, and the Silverman Holdings Group. Combined, these accounts represent $18 million in managed assets. That's approximately 60% of your firm's total assets under management. My father's face went ashen. "That's impossible. Those are my most stable clients. The Westfield Trust has been with me for 12 years. Marcus tapped the screen again, showing the legal structure behind the trust. The Westfield Trust is controlled by a holding company, which is in turn owned by Summit Facility Holdings. Jonathan has been the silent money behind your most successful years, Richard. He's the real owner of those client portfolios. The revelation hit my father like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow and rapid. Patricia reached for him, but he pulled away, unable to accept comfort for something this devastating. Without those 3 accounts, Marcus continued mercilessly, your firm will be unable to meet its basic operational costs. You have 4 employees, whose salaries total $38,000 monthly. Your office lease alone is $22,000 per month. Your firm will effectively be insolvent within 60 days, likely sooner once word spreads that your major clients have withdrawn. But there's more, Marcus said, moving to the next document. The office building lease for Peterson Investment Management expires in 30 days. Jonathan owns that building. He's decided not to renew the lease. You'll need to vacate the premises by the end of next month. Derek suddenly grabbed his phone, which had been buzzing insistently. His face went white as he looked at the screen. It's my boss, he said, his voice barely audible. At Henderson Tech. You should answer that, I said quietly. Derek's hands shook as he accepted the call. Hello? Yes, this is Derek. His face changed as he listened, going from pale to completely bloodless. What? But I thought, the entire department? When? He listened for another moment, then slowly lowered the phone. I just lost my job. Christina let out a small scream. What? What do you mean you lost your job? Henderson Tech is being acquired, Derek said mechanically, like he was reading from a script. The new ownership is restructuring. My entire department is being eliminated, effective immediately. They're offering 2 weeks severance and outplacement services. He turned to look at me, his eyes wild. Did you do this? Did you orchestrate this to destroy me? I shook my head. I have no connection to Henderson Tech or whoever's acquiring them. I don't even know what company is buying them. This is just coincidence, Derek. Terrible timing, but not my doing. But the coincidence made everything feel worse for them. Derek sat back heavily in his chair, his expensive wedding suit suddenly feeling like a costume. Christina turned to him, her voice rising to a near shriek. You told me your job was secure. You said you were being considered for director. We bought $40,000 worth of furniture for the condo. We booked a $25,000 honeymoon to Bora Bora. How are we going to pay for any of that without your salary? I'll find another job, Derek said weakly. In this economy? In tech? Christina laughed bitterly. Do you have any idea how many senior managers are looking for work right now? It could take 6 months to find something comparable. Marcus cleared his throat, drawing attention back to him. There's also the matter of your apartment lease, Derek. The application you submitted included a representation that your household income was $180,000 annually. With your job loss, that's no longer accurate. There's a clause in the lease about material misrepresentation that allows for termination with 30 days' notice. Derek's face crumpled. You're going to evict me on my wedding day? And Patricia, Marcus continued, turning to my mother. Your boutique lease is up for renewal next month. The current rent is $8,000 monthly. The market rate for that space has increased significantly. The renewal offer will reflect current market conditions, which would be approximately $18,000 per month. My mother's voice came out as a whisper. I can't afford that. My boutique barely breaks even as it is. An increase like that would force me to close. Yes, Marcus agreed simply. It would. The family sat in ruins around the table. My father's business was collapsing. Derek had lost his job and was facing eviction from his new home. My mother was about to lose her boutique. And all of it was connected to me, to decisions I had made or could make, to power they never knew I possessed. Christina was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her face. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. We just got married. How is this happening? Patricia finally found her voice, looking at me with desperate eyes. Jonathan, please, I'm begging you. Show mercy. Help your family. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we're still your family. You can't just destroy us like this. I looked at each of them in turn. My father, who had stolen my inheritance and mocked me publicly. My brother, who had known about the theft and stayed silent for personal gain. My mother, who had been too ashamed of me to defend me or even acknowledge me for years. And Christina, who had just discovered that marrying into my family was not the social coup she had imagined. I'm going to address each of you individually, I said quietly. And I want you to really listen to what I'm about to say. I turned to Patricia first. Mom, you asked why I never told you about my success, but I want you to answer a question for me. In the past 8 years, how many times did you call me? How many times did you invite me to family dinners or holidays? How many times did you defend me when Dad and Derek made jokes about my poverty? Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at her hands. I didn't, she whispered finally. I never called. I never defended you. Why not? I pressed. Because I was ashamed, she admitted, tears flowing freely now. I was ashamed of what my friends would think if they knew my son was a janitor. I was ashamed to talk about you at my charity events and book club meetings. I was ashamed, so I pretended you barely existed. I nodded slowly, then turned to Derek. Do you remember when we were kids? When you were struggling in high school and I spent every evening for 2 years tutoring you in math and science so you could get into a decent college? Derek nodded miserably. Do you remember when you were a senior in college and needed $5,000 for your final semester because your scholarship didn't cover everything? I gave you my college savings, every penny I had put away for my own education. I told you it was a loan, but when you graduated and got your first job, you never paid me back. I never mentioned it because you were my brother and I wanted you to succeed. I remember, Derek said quietly. So when you found out Dad had stolen $500,000 from me, money that could have changed my life, why did you stay silent? Why did you choose Dad's promise of a partnership over your brother's right to know the truth? Derek had no answer. He simply stared at the table, his face a mask of shame. Finally, I turned to my father. Dad, what happened to you? When I was young, you told me that character matters more than money. You said that how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from them shows who you really are. What happened to that man? Richard looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen from crying. My father happened, he said hoarsely. Your grandfather. He criticized me my entire life. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I started my investment firm, he told me I'd fail within a year. When I made my first $1 million, he said it was luck, not skill. When you were born, he told me I'd probably raise you to be as mediocre as I was. He paused, wiping his eyes with shaking hands. So I became obsessed with proving him wrong. I became obsessed with status and wealth and success. I needed to show him that I wasn't a failure. And when you dropped out of business school, all I could see was his voice in my head, telling me I'd raised another failure. So I pushed you away instead of asking what was really going on. I mocked you instead of supporting you. And I stole from you because I was desperate to maintain the illusion of success that I thought would finally make him respect me. The confession hung in the air between us. 3 generations of pain and dysfunction, of fathers failing sons and sons trying desperately to prove themselves worthy. My grandfather had wounded my father deeply, and my father had passed that wound on to me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it on the table in front of them. They all stared at it like it might explode. This envelope contains 3 things, I said. First, the title and deed to your house, Mom and Dad. The house you've lived in for 30 years. The one the bank was foreclosing on 6 months ago. I bought it before the foreclosure went through. You didn't know because I did it through an LLC, and I had the bank maintain the illusion that you were still making mortgage payments. Patricia gasped. Richard's head snapped up, shock written across his face. Second, there's a cashier's check for $500,000. The exact amount Dad stole from my inheritance, plus 8 years of conservative investment returns. Third, there are signed documents that dissolve my business ties to every property and company you're connected to. Every lease, every contract, every financial relationship between us ends completely. I pushed the envelope slightly closer to them. You have a choice to make. You can take this envelope and accept my help. But if you do, it means admitting you were wrong. It means committing to honestly working to rebuild our relationship. It means therapy, accountability, and real change. I paused, making sure they understood the weight of what I was offering. Or you can refuse the envelope. You can walk away from me forever. And if you do that, I'll pull all financial support. I'll let the natural consequences of your choices play out. Dad's firm will collapse. Derek will lose his apartment. Mom will lose her boutique. Your house will revert to foreclosure proceedings. You'll face the full weight of the decisions you've made and the bridges you've burned. I looked at each of them. But here's the condition. You have to decide right now, in this moment, with complete honesty. Not about whether you want my money, but about whether you love me as a son and brother, or whether you only see me as a resource to be used. Because I won't be used anymore. I won't be the family safety net while simultaneously being the family embarrassment. Richard's hand moved toward the envelope immediately, reaching for the salvation it offered. But Patricia's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, pulling him back. She looked at the envelope, then at me, then at her husband. "No," she said firmly. Everyone stared at her in shock. Patricia pushed the envelope back across the table toward me, her hand trembling but her voice steady. "If I take that money now, if we accept your help in this moment, I'll never know if I'm being honest with myself. I'll never know if I love you as my son or if I'm just desperate and broken and reaching for a lifeline." She looked at me directly, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in 8 years. "You deserve better than that, Jonathan. You deserve a mother who loves you because of who you are, not because of what you can give her. And right now, in this moment, I can't honestly tell you which one I am. I've spent so long being ashamed of you that I don't know how to not be ashamed." Tears streamed down her face as she continued. "I want to earn back your trust, not buy it, not take advantage of your generosity when we're all at rock bottom. I want to become someone who deserves to be your mother. And I can't do that if I take this easy way out." The raw honesty in her words hit harder than any anger or accusation could have. This was real. This was painful. This was the beginning of something true, even if it hurt. Derek stood up suddenly, walking to the window overlooking the parking lot. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped behind his back. The silence stretched out as we waited for him to speak. Finally, he turned around. "I've been jealous of you my entire life," Derek said, his voice cracking. "Everyone always said you were the smart one, the capable one, the one with real potential. I was just the younger brother trying to keep up. So when you dropped out of business school, a part of me was relieved. Finally, I could be the successful one. Finally, I could be the son Dad was proud of." He walked back to the table but didn't sit down. "When I found out about the inheritance Dad stole, I should have told you immediately. But I didn't because I was afraid that if you got that money, you'd do something amazing with it. You'd prove everyone right about how capable you were. And I'd go back to being the lesser brother." Derek's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I built my entire identity around being the successful one. My job, my condo, my marriage, everything was designed to prove I was better than you. But I'm not better than you. I never was. I was just luckier that you chose to hide your success while I advertised mine." He looked at the envelope on the table. "I don't deserve your help, Jonathan. I actively worked against you. I stayed silent about theft. I mocked you publicly. I treated you like you were worthless." He met my eyes. "But I want the chance to become someone who would deserve a brother like you, even if it takes years, even if it means losing everything I have now." The transformation in the room was palpable. These weren't the same people who had mocked me an hour ago. The masks had been stripped away, and what remained was raw and real and broken. My father had remained silent through both confessions, but now he finally spoke. "When you asked me what happened to the man who taught you that character matters more than money, I didn't give you the complete answer." He stood up slowly, his movements those of a man who had aged years in a single evening. "The truth is, I saw that man as weak. My father constantly criticized him, mocked him, told him that being principled was just an excuse for being unsuccessful. So I killed him. I deliberately became someone different, someone harder, someone who valued success over integrity. And in doing so, I became exactly like my father. I became the kind of man who would steal from his own son and justify it as protecting family interests." Richard walked around the table and stopped a few feet from me. Taking that envelope would be the easy path. It would solve all my immediate problems. But I've taken too many easy paths, and every single one has led me further from the man I should have been. His voice broke completely. "I'll face the consequences of my choices, Jonathan. My firm will collapse, and I'll deserve it. I stole from you and from my client's trust. I'll have to rebuild from nothing, and maybe that's exactly what I need. Maybe I need to learn humility the way you learned strength." He paused, tears flowing freely now. "I won't ask for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but I'm going to get help. Real help. I'm going to start therapy tomorrow to address my issues with status and control and my father's voice in my head. And someday, maybe years from now, I hope I can become someone you'd be willing to call Dad again." The three of them stood before me, completely broken but somehow more whole than I had ever seen them. They had made their choice. They had chosen the hard path, the painful path, the path of real change instead of easy solutions. I looked down at the envelope on the table, then back at my family. "I have something to confess," I said quietly. "The envelope doesn't contain what I told you it did." Their faces registered confusion and concern. I picked up the envelope and opened it, pulling out the contents and spreading them across the table. "The house deed is real," I confirmed. "And it is a gift to you, Mom, but with a legal stipulation that it's separated from Dad's business debts. That's to protect you, to make sure you have security even if everything else falls apart." I pointed to the next document. "The check isn't for Dad. It's actually two checks. One for $250,000 in a trust fund for Mom's future security. The other for $250,000 to a charity I established in Grandfather's name, providing business loans to young entrepreneurs who can't get traditional financing." Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Richard closed his eyes, fresh tears streaming down his face. "And these documents," I said, pointing to the final stack of papers, "don't dissolve my business ties to you. They actually offer Dad a job managing one of my smaller commercial properties. The salary is $65,000 a year. It's honest work, property management, but it's far below what you're used to earning. You'd have to prove yourself through actual work, not through financial manipulation." I turned to Derek. "For you, I've arranged an interview at Maxwell Consulting. They're one of the companies that contracts with Summit Facility Services for project management. But it's just an interview, Derek. You'll have to earn the position on your own merit. I won't put my thumb on the scale for you. If you're good enough, you'll get hired. If you're not, you'll have to look elsewhere." Finally, I addressed all three of them together. "The wedding reception is canceled. That's not changing. But I own another property down the street, a smaller restaurant called the Garden House. It seats about 70 people. I've arranged for your wedding party to be moved there. The extravagant celebration with 200 guests is over, but Derek and Christina can still have their wedding day. Just without the pretense, without the performance, without the need to prove anything to anyone." I paused, letting my words sink in. "I'll attend as a guest if you want me there, but only if you're ready to have me as family, not as a bank, not as a safety net, not as a resource to be used. As your son, as your brother, as someone you actually want in your life because of who I am, not what I have." I looked at my watch. "I'm going to leave now. You have 1 hour to decide what you want. If you want me at your wedding, truly want me there, text me within the hour. The Garden House is 3 blocks west of here. The staff is expecting you. Everything is arranged." I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. "One more thing. Whether you text me or not, whether you want me there or not, the house is still yours, Mom. The trusts are still established. And Dad, the job offer is still available if you want it. Those aren't conditional on your decision about the wedding. Those are what family should do for each other, even when things are broken, even when trust has been shattered, even when the path forward is unclear." I left the room without waiting for a response. Marcus and the security team followed me out, leaving my family alone with their thoughts and their choices. 53 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. 3 simple words followed by an address. "Please come. Love, Mom." Below that, Derek had added, "We want our brother there." And finally, "My father. I'd be honored if you'd attend. Dad." I stood in my hotel room where I had gone to change clothes and give them space to decide. I stared at the phone for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision before me. 8 years of pain, betrayal, and loneliness competed with the possibility of something different, something healed, something real. I changed into casual clothes, khakis, and a simple button-down shirt, nothing fancy or expensive looking. Then I drove my 20-year-old Honda Civic the 3 blocks to the garden house. I could have taken one of the luxury cars I owned, could have arrived in style to prove a point. But that wasn't what tonight needed. The garden house was beautiful in its simplicity. String lights hung over an outdoor patio surrounded by flowering trees. Inside, about 50 guests sat at simple wooden tables. These were the people who really mattered, I realized. Family members who had always been kind, close friends who had supported Derek and Christina genuinely, people who cared about the couple rather than the spectacle. As I walked in, conversation stopped. Heads turned. But this time, the attention felt different. I saw curiosity instead of contempt, interest instead of mockery. My father stood near the entrance, and when he saw me, he walked over immediately. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Then, without warning, he did something he hadn't done since I was a small child. He hugged me. Not a brief, formal hug, but a real embrace. The kind that communicates years of words left unsaid. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan, for everything." I hugged him back, feeling my own tears start to fall. "I know, Dad." Patricia approached next, her eyes red from crying, but her expression more peaceful than I had seen in years. She took both my hands in hers. "I see you now," she said simply. "Really see you. And I'm so proud of the man you became despite us. Not because of us." Derek and Christina stood by the small altar that had been set up in the garden. Derek gestured for me to join them. I walked over, unsure what he wanted. "I need to do something," Derek said to the assembled guests, his voice carrying across the intimate space. "Before Christina and I continue with this celebration, I need to tell everyone the complete truth about what happened tonight." Christina looked nervous, but she nodded her support. Derek took a deep breath and began to speak. "Most of you saw what happened at the Grand Meridian. You saw my father humiliate my brother Jonathan. You saw me mock him, offer him money like charity, treat him like he was worthless." His voice cracked with emotion. "What you didn't see was what happened after. What you didn't know was that Jonathan owns that building. He owns 17 properties in this city. He's built a business empire worth nearly $100 million, while we all thought he was just a janitor." Gasps and murmurs spread through the small crowd. Derek continued, his voice growing stronger. "But here's what's more important than his wealth. When he revealed the truth to us, when he had every right to destroy us completely, he didn't. He could have evicted me. He could have bankrupted my father. He could have walked away and let us face the consequences of our cruelty. Instead, he offered us help. Real help. And when we said we didn't want to take the easy path, when we said we wanted to earn back his trust instead of buying it with his own money, he respected that choice." Derek turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "My brother is a better man than I'll ever be, and I spent years being jealous of him instead of learning from him. So before I go any further with this wedding, I need to say publicly what I should have said years ago. Jonathan, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. And I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was too broken to show it." The crowd was completely silent. I stood there, overwhelmed by the moment, by the honesty, by the raw vulnerability of it all. I stepped forward and hugged my brother. Really hugged him, for the first time in years. "I love you too," I whispered. "We'll figure this out together." The ceremony that followed was beautiful in its simplicity. Derek and Christina renewed their vows in front of the people who truly mattered. There was no performance, no pretense, just two people promising to build a life together. When it came time for the toasts, my father asked if he could speak. Richard stood with a glass of wine, his hands shaking slightly. "I had a speech prepared for the original reception," he began. "It was full of jokes and stories designed to make me look good, to show everyone what a successful father I was. But that speech was a lie, so I'm going to tell you the truth instead." He looked at me as he continued. "I failed my eldest son. I failed him in every way a father can fail. I let my own insecurities and my father's criticism turn me into someone cruel and small. I stole from him. I mocked him. I pushed him away. And he succeeded anyway. Not because of me, but despite me." Richard's voice broke completely. Jonathan is the son I should have been. He's the man my father wanted me to be. And it took losing everything tonight for me to finally see that. So this toast isn't to the groom. This toast is to my son Jonathan, who showed me what real strength looks like, who taught me that character matters more than money, even when I had forgotten that lesson myself. He raised his glass. To Jonathan. May I someday become half the man you already are. The guests raised their glasses, and I saw genuine emotion on their faces. These people didn't know me as a janitor or as a millionaire. They were meeting me fresh in this moment, seeing me as I actually was. It felt like being born again, like stepping into my real identity for the first time in years. The rest of the evening unfolded with warmth and genuine connection. People approached me with curiosity and respect, asking about my business, my journey, my story. I told them honestly about the struggles, the lonely years, the choice to work as a janitor to stay connected to my employees. I shared my grandfather's wisdom about character and wealth. I talked about the pain of family rejection and the harder choice of offering forgiveness instead of revenge. As the party wound down, I found myself sitting in the garden with my mother. The string lights cast a warm glow over her face, and for a moment, I could see the woman she had been before. Shame and status had consumed her. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we do the hard work, I said. Now we rebuild trust slowly, through actions, not words. Now we figure out how to be a family without the weight of secrets and lies between us. Will you forgive us? She asked. Eventually, I thought about the question carefully before answering. I already have, Mom. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing not to let that pain define our future. But forgiveness doesn't automatically restore trust. Trust has to be earned back through time and consistency, through showing up, even when it's hard, through choosing honesty over comfort. She nodded, understanding the distinction. I'll show up, she promised. Every day I'll show up. I don't know how to be the mother you deserved, but I'll learn. I'll do the work. That's all I'm asking, I said. As I drove home that night in my old Honda Civic, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 8 years ago, I had been a business school dropout with a $10,000 loan and a dream. I had built an empire while my family thought I was a failure. I had endured their mockery, their rejection, their cruelty. And tonight, I had made a choice. Not the easy choice of revenge, though that would have felt satisfying. Not the equally easy choice of simply handing them money and fixing their problems, but the hard choice of offering them a path to redemption while holding them accountable for their actions. I thought about my grandfather, the man who had believed in me enough to leave me an inheritance that could change my life. He never got to see what I built, never got to know that his faith in me was justified. But I hoped somehow he knew. I hoped he understood that his lesson about character mattering more than money had taken root and grown into something real and strong. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Just 5 words. But they meant everything. Thank you for not giving up on us. I realized something profound in that moment. True success isn't measured by the empire you build or the money you accumulate. It's measured by who you become in the process. It's measured by how you treat people who can't help you, by how you respond when you're wronged, by whether you choose bitterness or grace when given the opportunity for revenge. My grandfather once told me that wealth reveals character, but doesn't create it. Tonight proved that truth in the hardest possible way. My family's true character had been revealed when they thought I was poor and worthless. My character was revealed when I had all the power and chose mercy instead of vengeance. And their character had evolved again when they chose the hard path of earned redemption over the easy path of bought forgiveness. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. My father would have to rebuild his career from near nothing, learning humility through honest work. Derek would have to prove himself without the safety net of family connections, discovering his own worth independent of comparison to me. My mother would have to confront her shame and her obsession with status, finding a new identity built on authenticity instead of appearances. But for the first time in 8 years, I had hope. Real hope that we could become the family we should have been all along. Not perfect, because no family is perfect, but honest, real. built on a foundation of genuine love instead of judgment, support instead of competition, grace instead of cruelty. As I pulled into my modest apartment complex, I smiled at the irony. I owned 17 commercial properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but I still lived in this simple studio apartment. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. Because it kept me grounded. Because it reminded me where I came from and why I built what I built. Tomorrow, I would go back to work as a janitor at one of the office buildings my company serviced. I would mop floors and clean bathrooms and chat with the night security guard. My employees would see their CEO doing the same work they did, and they would know that I understood their struggles and valued their labor. And maybe in a few weeks or months, I would invite my father to join me for a shift. Let him see what honest work feels like, what it means to serve instead of be served. Let him discover the dignity in labor that I had found years ago. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But tonight had proven something important, that people can change, that families can heal, that the hardest strength is not in building an empire, but in remaining humble at the top and generous at the bottom, remembering that every person's story is more complicated than it appears. I thought about all of you listening to this story and wondered what you would have done in my situation. When your family hurts you deeply, rejects you, mocks you, steals from you, would you choose revenge or redemption? Would you use your power to destroy them or to offer them a path back? There's no easy answer, and I don't pretend my choice was the only right one. But it was my choice, and I've made peace with it. So let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven your family after everything they did? Would you have offered them help or let them face the consequences alone? How do you balance accountability with mercy, justice with grace? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you in some way, if it made you think about your own relationships and choices, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Someone struggling with family pain or betrayal, or the question of forgiveness. Thank you for taking this journey with me tonight. Thank you for listening to my story, for caring about the messy complexity of family and redemption and second chances. I hope you leave this story with something valuable. Whether it's hope for your own difficult relationships or simply the reminder that success without character is hollow, but character without bitterness is strength. Take care of yourselves. And remember that how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from them shows who you really are. Choose to be someone you're proud of, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Good night, and I'll see you in the next story.